CyanogenMod is an open-source operating system for smartphones and tablet computers, based on the Android mobile platform. It is developed as free and open-source software based on the official releases of Android by Google, with added original and third-party code. Initially, CyanogenMod releases were provided on a nightly, milestone, and stable version schedule. As of CyanogenMod 11.m6, the stable label will no longer be used, having been supplanted by milestone M builds that are part of the CyanogenMod's rolling release development model. CyanogenMod offers features and options not found in the official firmware distributed by mobile device vendors. Features supported by CyanogenMod include native theming support, FLAC audio codec support, a large access point name list, an open VPN client, Privacy Guard a per application permission management app, support for tethering over common interfaces, CPU overclocking and other performance enhancements, soft buttons and other tablet tweaks, toggles in the notification pull-down, as well as other interface enhancements. CyanogenMod does not contain spyware or bloatware, according to its developers. CyanogenMod is also stated to increase performance and reliability compared with official firmware releases. Although only a subset of total CyanogenMod users elect to report their use of the firmware, as of June 2014, CyanogenMod has recorded over 12 million active installs on a multitude of devices. In 2013, project founder Steve Kondik announced that venture funding had been obtained to establish Cyanogen Incorporated as a commercial enterprise to develop and market the firmware more widely. This announcement has led to controversy within the community, with some developers asserting that rights and licensing issues, acknowledging compensating past developers and honoring the original ethos of the community project, are not being adequately addressed. These claims were rejected by Kondik, who affirmed support for the community and stated that most CyanogenMod code, as with Android generally, is bound by a non-restrictive Apache license. Firmware history and development. Soon after the introduction of the HTC Dream mobile phone in September 2008, a method was discovered to attain privileged control within Android's Linux-based subsystem. Having root access, combined with the open-source nature of the Android operating system, allowed the phone's stock firmware to be modified and reinstalled onto the phone. In the following year, several modified firmwares for the Dream were developed and distributed by Android enthusiasts. One, maintained by a developer named Jesus Freak, quickly became popular among Dream owners. In August 2009, Jesus Freak stopped work on his firmware, and suggested users switch to a version of his ROM that had been further enhanced by developer Cyanogen called CyanogenMod. CyanogenMod quickly grew in popularity, and a small community of developers, called the CyanogenMod team, made contributions. Within a few months, the number of devices and features supported by CyanogenMod blossomed, and CyanogenMod quickly became one of the most popular Android firmware distributions. Like many open-source projects, CyanogenMod is developed using a distributed revision control system with the official repositories being hosted on GitHub. Contributors submit new feature or bug fix changes using Google Source Code Review System, GRIT. Contributions may be tested by anyone, voted up or down by registered users, and ultimately accepted into the code by one of a handful of CyanogenMod developers. A version of ADW Launcher, an alternative launcher for the Android operating system, became the default launcher on CyanogenMod 5.0.8. The launcher provides additional features not provided by the default Android launcher, including more customization abilities, the ability to backup and restore configuration settings, and other features. As of version 9, CyanogenMod's own launcher, TurboJ, is included with the firmware. CyanogenMod 7, CyanogenMod 7 firmware is based on Android 2.3 Gingerbread with additional custom code contributed by the CyanogenMod team. The custom portions of CyanogenMod are primarily written by Cyanogen but include contributions from the XDA developers community and code from established open-source projects. CyanogenMod 7 development began when Google released Android 2.3 source code. On February 15, 2011, the first release candidates of CyanogenMod 7 were rolled out on several of the supported devices. The fourth release candidate was released on March 30, 2011 and brought increased support for thinner color and similar devices as well as many bug fixes. On April 11, 2011, the public version of CyanogenMod 7.0 was released, based on Android 2.3.3. CyanogenMod 7.1 was released on October 10, 2011, based on Android 2.3.4. The latest stable version, CyanogenMod 7.2 was released on June 16, 2012, based on Android 2.3.7, bringing a predictive phone dialer, lock screen updates, ICS animation backports and many bug fixes. CyanogenMod 8. CyanogenMod version 8 was planned to be based on Android 3x Honeycomb. However, no source code for Honeycomb was provided by Google until it appeared in the tree history of the Android 4.0 Ice Cream Sandwich source release. Since Honeycomb was superseded by Ice Cream Sandwich, the release schedule advanced from CyanogenMod 7 directly to CyanogenMod 9. CyanogenMod 9. CyanogenMod 9 is based on Google's Android 4.0 Ice Cream Sandwich. Steve Kondik and his team have announced that they had begun work on the new release after Google released the source code of Android 4.0.1. Development on this release took longer than with previous releases due to the significance of the changes between Android 2.3 Gingerbread and 4.0 Ice Cream Sandwich, and the team took this opportunity to clarify their vision for the ROM and rethink any modifications which were no longer necessary due to improvements within Android. By the last days of November 2011, some alpha versions had been distributed, in particular for the Samsung mobile phones Nexus S and Galaxy S. On August 9, 2012, after various betas and release candidates, CyanogenMod released the finished version of CyanogenMod 9. Given that the next version of Android, 4.1 Jelly Bean, had already been released by that point, development moved swiftly on to CyanogenMod 10. On August 29, 2012, CyanogenMod released a minor update, version 9.1.0, bringing bug fixes and an app called Simply TAPP for NFC payments. On April 4, 2012, during development, CyanogenMod unveiled said, the new CyanogenMod mascot, which replaced the previous mascot, Andy the skateboarding bug droid. Designed by user Chow, CID is an abbreviation of CyanogenMod ID. CyanogenMod 10. In early July 2012, the CyanogenMod team announced, via its Google Plus account, that CyanogenMod 10 would be based on Android 4.1 Jelly Bean. Nightly builds of CyanogenMod 10 were made available for many devices supported by CyanogenMod 9. Starting with the September 2012 M1 build, the CyanogenMod team began monthly M-series releases. At the beginning of each month, a soft freeze of the CyanogenMod codebase is put into effect. Once the team deems a build stable enough for daily use, it is released under the Milestone or M-series. On November 13, 2012, final stable builds were released for several devices. CyanogenMod 10.1. CyanogenMod 10.1 is based on Android 4.2 Jelly Bean. Nightly versions are currently being released for an array of devices, along with M-snapshots which are being released for select devices. On June 24, 2013, the CyanogenMod 10.1.0 codebase was moved to stable status, with a majority of currently supported devices receiving stable builds on the same day. CyanogenMod's developers have indicated that they will continue the monthly snapshot schedule to incorporate new features until the next CyanogenMod release. Unfortunately, many devices utilizing Samsung Exynos and NVIDIA Tegra 2 SoCs were not part of the initial release. CyanogenMod 10.2, the first nightly release of CyanogenMod 10.2, which is based on Android 4.3 Jelly Bean, began rolling out for a selected number of devices on August 14, 2013. It brings in some new enhancements to the system, such as Bluetooth Low Energy and OpenGL AESA 3.0 support, a renewed phone app, 4K resolution support as well as many security and stability improvements. CyanogenMod 11. On November 6, 2013, the CyanogenMod team started pushing the code of CyanogenMod 11, based on Android 4.4 KitKat, to GitHub. The first nightly release of CyanogenMod 11.0 began rolling out for a selected number of devices on December 5, 2013. Since then, builds have been released every month for supported devices, offering a more stable experience than nightlies. With build M6, it was clarified that CyanogenMod would no longer be releasing final builds specially tagged stable, but instead would utilize the rolling release model with builds representing a stable channel. Cyanogen Incorporated. Cyanogen Incorporated is a venture-funded company with offices in Seattle and Palo Alto, California, announced officially in September 2013, which aims to commercialize CyanogenMod. The funding was led by Mitch Lasky of Benchmark and raised $7 million. Commercialization controversy. Rumors of plans to commercialize CyanogenMod as well as the subsequent announcement of Cyanogen Incorporated has led to some discord within the CyanogenMod community. Several CyanogenMod developers have asserted concerns regarding rights and licensing issues, appropriately acknowledging compensating past developers for their work, and concerns of undermining the original ethos of the community project are being inadequately addressed. Examples include focal camera app developer Guillaume Lesniak, whose app was withdrawn from CyanogenMod allegedly following demands by the new company to adopt closed-source modifications and licensing. In response, Steve Kondiga found commitment to the community, stating that the majority of CyanogenMod was in fact historically not GPL but Apache licensed, and dual licensing was being proposed in order to offer a stronger degree of protection for contributors. While still offering CM some of the freedoms that the Apache license offers, Google has gone to great lengths to avoid the GPL by building their own low-level components such as Dalvik and Bionic. In CM, the only GPL component that currently comes to mind that be unregistered trademark they added is our Torch app. The Apache license specifically allows precisely what you suggest it do as an unregistered trademark T. A dual license would do the same, but also protect contributors by forcing unaffiliated entities to contribute back if they use the software in a commercial context. Unregistered trademark S not so that CM can close the source and still ship it to our users. Again, we don't unregistered trademark T have any plans to change licenses. Focal is a special case. It has to be GPL because Focal uses a number of GPL components under the hood. I propose the dual license extension as a way to work around some of the inherent problems with the GPL and give a greater degree of freedom to both him and CM as an organization. This is a very common licensing model in the open source world. But none of this matters. We unregistered trademark not closing the source or changing the license of any code that has been contributed to the project. Developer Entropy 512 also observed that CyanogenMod was legally bound by its position to make some of the firmware changes, because of the Android license and marketing conditions which specify what apps may and may not do, and these were raised in part by Android developers at Google and formally speculatively as a result of perceptions of CyanogenMod's high profile in the market. In his 2013 blog post on Cyanogen Incorporated's funding, venture funder Mitch Lasky states that Benchmark has a long history of supporting open-source projects intent on becoming successful enterprises. Our open-source history includes Red Hat, MySQL, Spring Source, JBoss, Eucalyptus, Zimbra, Elasticsearch, Hortonworks, and now Cyanogen. We unregistered trademark they've been behind many of the most successful open-source software companies in the world. We have a deep respect for the special needs of these businesses, and how to build companies while preserving the transparency and vigor of the open-source communities. Industry reaction. Early responses of tablet and smartphone manufacturers and mobile carriers were typically unsupportive of third-party firmware development such as CyanogenMod. Manufacturers expressed concern about improper functioning of devices running unofficial software and the related support costs. Moreover, modified firmwares such as CyanogenMod sometimes offer features for which carriers would otherwise charge a premium. As a result, Technical obstacles including locked bootloaders and restricted access to root permissions were common in many devices. However, as community-developed software has grown more popular and following a statement by the Library of Congress in the United States that permits jailbreaking mobile devices, manufacturers and carriers have softened their position regarding CyanogenMod and other unofficial firmware distributions, with some, including HTC, Motorola, Samsung and Sony Ericsson, providing support and encouraging development. As a result of this, in 2011 the need to circumvent hardware restrictions to install unofficial firmware lessened as an increasing number of devices shipped with unlocked or unlockable bootloaders, similar to the Nexus series of phones. Device manufacturers HTC and Motorola announced that they would support aftermarket software developers by making the bootloaders of all new devices unlockable, although this still violates a device's warranty. Samsung sent several Galaxy S2 phones to the CyanogenMod team with the express purpose of bringing CyanogenMod to the device, and mobile carrier T-Mobile USA voiced its support for the CyanogenMod project, tweeting CM7 is great. Phone manufacturers have also taken to releasing developer editions of phones that are unlocked. Licensing. Until version April 1, 11.1. CyanogenMod included several proprietary software applications by Google, such as Gmail, Maps, Android Market, Talk, and YouTube, as well as several proprietary hardware drivers. These packages were included with the vendor distributions of Android, but not licensed for free distribution. After Google sent a cease and desist letter to CyanogenMod's chief developer, Steve Kondik, in late September 2009 demanding he stop distributing the aforementioned applications, development ceased for a few days. The reaction from many CyanogenMod users towards Google was hostile, with some claiming that Google's legal threats hurt their own interests, violated their informal corporate motto "Don't be evil," and was a challenge to the open-source community Google claimed to embrace. Following a statement from Google clarifying its position and a subsequent negotiation between Google and Cyanogen, it was resolved that the CyanogenMod project would continue, in a form that did not directly bundle in the proprietary Google Experience components. It was determined that the proprietary Google apps may be backed up from the Google-supplied firmware on the phone and then reinstalled onto CyanogenMod releases without infringing copyright. On September 28, 2009, Cyanogen warned that while issues no longer remain with Google, there was still potential licensing problems regarding proprietary, closed-source device drivers. On September 30, 2009, Cyanogen posted an update on the matter. Kondik wrote he was rebuilding the source tree, and that he believed the licensing issues with drivers could be worked out. He added that he was also receiving assistance from Google employees. On June 16, 2012, the CyanogenMod 7.2 release announcement stated, CyanogenMod does still include various hardware-specific code, which is also slowly being open-sourced anyway. Version history. Supported devices. See also. References. External links, official website, wiki, supported devices. CyanogenMod on Facebook, CyanogenMod on Twitter, Android Source Code Project, Steve Kondik on the CyanogenMod project on YouTube.